God calls us to awaken him, how will he find us when he comes?
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate our lives ever more perfectly to him, how will he find us?
Awake and ready.
Let's pray together. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great masters,
great masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
and our beloved Guru,
our beloved Guru,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
we bow to you all.
we bow to you all.
Guide our hearts,
Guide our hearts,
guide our minds,
guide our minds,
lead us on the path that leads to thee,
lead us on the path that leads to thee,
uplift our consciousness,
uplift our consciousness,
guide us home.
guide us home.
We are yours.
We are yours.
Om.
Om.
Peace.
Peace.
Amen.
Please have a seat. We'll start with some music. This is George's last service with us. We're going to miss him. And I asked that he would sing this song. This is a Catholic song from a church called Earthen Vessels. If you know it, you're welcome to sing it. But the reason I asked George to play this today, it has a special meaning for me personally, because when my father passed away suddenly, I asked, I don't know if it's like an Italian thing or whatever, the sign from God when somebody passes that their soul is at peace. So anyway, not to get into the whole long story, but a couple weeks later, it was a miraculous occurrence, and my mother chose this song at my father's funeral. And 2 weeks after that funeral, she was at another church, and she heard this song, and she said, "Oh, it's a sign." And of course, the cynical part of me said, "Oh yeah, right, whatever. It's just they play the same song, you know. They play all the same songs in the church, you know, over and over." So I didn't think much of it, but she said, "I'm praying that you receive a sign today, Philip." And that same day, it was a Sunday. We were at home, Dharma Devi and I opened Autobiography of a Yogi, as I do often. I just opened it to a random page, and it was Babaji with Lahiri. And he said, and he lifted an earthen vessel. So, this song, the refrain is beautiful. We hold a treasure not made of gold in earthen vessels, wealth untold, one treasure only, the Lord Christ, in earthen vessels. Please sing.
In earthen vessels.
Let's continue to meditate as we listen to these words from Affirmations for Self-Healing on calmness. Calmness is perfectly achieved when life's little wave becomes absorbed into the cosmic sea in divine ecstasy. In daily life, too, we can achieve calmness to a degree by keeping our awareness focused on the reality of the Spirit underlying all outward circumstances. Calmness comes with the determination to live ever happily in the present moment, relinquishing the past and not worrying about the future, but placing our lives firmly in God's hands and knowing that He is fully in command. Calmness comes with non-attachment, with knowing that nothing in this world is truly ours. Let's affirm together. Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms.
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms.
A little softer. Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms.
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms.
In a whisper. Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
Though the winds of
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms. Now mentally, though the winds of difficulties howl around me, I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms. Lifting it to the point between the eyebrows, broadcasting it silently, but with deep, calm concentration. Though the winds of difficulties howl around me, I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms. Pray with me silently. With Thee beside me, I know that the tides of trouble can never sweep me away. Hold fast my hand, Lord, never let me go. Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Great joy to be with you. I was thinking of that fairy tale where the fox dresses up as the old grandmom, but the fox kind of has a beard, and I was like, oh, that's Peter. It's not Dharma Devi. Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries of the Bible and the Gita. This is week 24, How Devotees Rise. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Last week we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, "The poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." Jesus is saying here that there is one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of a material kind. Poverty in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above every other consideration. Never allow a moment of inner joy, for instance, to be set aside for lesser, quote, duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashaya, the guru of Yogananda's guru, said, to listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty. Mary on this occasion was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit, as she had been when Martha urged Jesus to reproach her for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary this time was serving outwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus reprimanded her sister Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies toward restless activity. The important thing is that the spirit be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do, we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be achieved without action. No one by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement can attain perfection. Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus, "Me ye have not always with you." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Father's Day. Read from Whispers from Eternity first. I will broadcast my voice with the chorus of thy songs. With the soft finger touches of my soul intuition, I tuned the radio of my inner perception. At first I caught only the sounds of my nearby experience. Then came a symphony of inner harmony, followed by sweet strains from my heart's orchestra of finer feelings. And then came the swelling chorus of my age-long cravings for thee. All these I caught on the radio of my soul as I kept tuning my perception, waiting to catch the whispers of thy voice, O guardian angel of souls. With infinite patience, I went on tuning my radio. At last, when I was almost prepared to give up farther trying, thy song burst upon my heart. Oh, let me broadcast through my every word now the chorus of thy songs. This dilemma between the inner, the meditation and outward activity starts to get, as Swami is describing, starts to get more and more similar. At one point in his writings, he said he contrasted them as being between calm inner absorption and restless preoccupation, and whether that's in meditation or in outward activity, we can be sort of playing between these two dynamics of calm inner absorption or restless preoccupation. And when I actually first read that, restless preoccupation, I got kind of excited because I was just like, oh, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. That's exactly the problem. And you defined it so well. But it stuck in my mind, and because that's always what we're dealing with. We can have meditations where there's a lot of restless preoccupation, and so the other side of the token, we can be inwardly absorbed, like he was talking about of Mary anointing Jesus' feet. There was this inner absorption where she was seeing it as a divine act, where he's blessing his feet and serving him in that way. And so it can be this, we can see this play, and no matter what we do, we can tune more and more into that inner reality in everything that we do. Just as an aside, I was actually reading, I was brushing up on the chapter for Raja Yoga yesterday. Keshav and I are teaching Raja Yoga course. And I was actually reading this whole section. There's this whole section in this chapter on concentration. And it was actually literally while I was reading this chapter that I got a text, and I was like, oh, a text! So I'm doing this, and then while I was, so long as I'm on the phone, I'm like checking Facebook, and I was like, what was I doing? Oh, concentration! So we just have to keep playing with it and working with ourselves as we are. I wanted, because it is Father's Day, I thought I'd take the opportunity to tell a few stories about my father, who was a lifelong disciple of his path, and he passed away 7 years ago almost.
Wow.
And his life was often his life was often serving in a business, or he was trying to provide for a family out there in the community. He didn't have like a typically ministerial role. And in my arrogance of youth, I thought, I started to get a big head about, we really, if he was really spiritual, he'd be being more ministerial. That was just, like I say, it was my own misconception. There's actually this quote from Mark Twain where he says, when I was 19, I thought my father was a fool, but by the time I was 22, I was impressed with how much he had grown. Of course, yeah. So that was, thankfully I learned pretty quick. But what I saw in him was he was putting the teachings to practice in everything that he did. Everything was a service. Everything was a way for him to be an instrument for that light. It was inner absorption. He was putting that into practice in everything that he did. There was one, this is actually before I was born, I believe, or maybe I was very small. Anyway, it was told to me, a story of him just contrasting these different dynamics and how devotees can rise. There was a period of time where he was doing handyman or like small construction jobs in Nevada City, the town nearby, Ananda village. And he was working with a man that really got caught by negativity and started getting negative towards Swami Ananda. And one day on the job, this man just said, oh, did you hear this? And oh, this and this, and just started going in this downward spiral. And my dad was on the roof just putting shingles on, and inwardly was just going, bless you, Swami, bless you, Swami, but over and over again the whole day. And what ended up happening was that man actually got very much caught in that downward spiral, and he actually left Ananda and became very negative towards Ananda, and Swami in particular. And my father was able to stay on the spiritual path throughout his whole life, and become more and more, find more and more depth and refinement over the course. That was 30 years or so before he passed away. And I mentioned his passing again because there was this moment with Swami. Swami came to visit him just before he passed away, actually. And one of the things that sticks in my mind the most was actually Swami taking his hand and saying, "You've been a great friend. You've been a good friend." All these, and there's no outward connection between those two events, but in my mind there was a direct line back to that, because it wasn't that specific event, but it was that attitude of divine friendship, just going in that. Just it all came from just going back inside and just saying. My dad must have, at that point, already experienced enough of who Swami was to just go, I know what's being said just isn't true. It's just not true. And there's always excuses in this world to sink into negativity. But we have to go inside and find that deeper part of ourselves where we can come back and say, no, I know that the ultimate reality is love. I know that the joy, I know what the masters have said is true, that we can rise. The other story I wanted to tell was actually of how my dad started storytelling. He became a great storyteller, and he would tell us stories of saints and heroes. And he had these stories of Jesus that he would tell. He had one for Christmas and some for Good Friday and Easter and so forth. And when he started, when he was a young man, he actually was very, very shy. Which people that knew him later in his life wouldn't have ever guessed. He was very shy. I don't know if this was actually literally true, but he said that if he was talking to more than like 3 people at a time, his knees would start to shake. He was very much he's very much a homesteader and like a hippie back to the land kind of person before Swami sort of plucked him and brought him out to the village. But he read at one point that Master said, Yogananda said, that shyness is actually a tamasic quality. Which is really interesting. We don't think of it as a tamasic quality, but what is shyness? It's this shrinking in on yourself and like, I don't want to be exposed. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to expand. And so he read that, and it was strong enough in him that he couldn't just say, oh, I'll just let it all go, and I'll go find some way to be in front of people and get over my shyness. But he was able to, in that place within, just say, okay, Master, if you give me the opportunity to help overcome shyness, I won't say no. And so he was at least able to embrace it on that level. And I think that sort of clues into what's really important on the path in terms of walking the path as devotees. We have to be very sincere with where we are and how we can take the next step. But he, just as the story goes, there was an Easter family service being planned. So just the families gathering, so it's just going to be 20 or so people, and they wanted someone to be able to tell stories of the Easter Sunday. And my dad was not at the meeting, and he learned his lesson on that. But my mom was, and she said, "Oh, Tim tells these great stories to the kids when they go to bed." Yeah. So she signed him up to tell this story. And but he had just promised himself that he wouldn't say no if the opportunity came. And so here the opportunity was, and so he's like, okay, it's only going to be 20, 25 people. It's okay. And just the way that Divine Mother plays little tricks on us, it was actually arranged just before Easter. It was actually arranged that, instead of just being a little family service, why don't we make a big community service? And it would just be before. So instead of 20 people, it was 250 people. But he did a really good job. He was able to do it. And for the rest of his life, he continued telling these stories. And by the end of his life, he actually shared this with my mom just a few years before he passed away. He said he knew that he was ready to tell a story of one of these saints, whether it's Jesus or Master or whoever it was. He told many stories, very many beautiful stories. He knew that he was ready. When he would go into seclusion for a day, and he knew that he was ready to tell this story. When thinking of the saint, he would weep with joy. And so that's in terms of the inner and the outer. That's why his stories, I think everyone that heard them would agree that they have so much power. I looked at his like a transcript of one of his stories one time, and it's very simple. I was really expecting it to be eloquent and all this, have this innate power. But it was a very simple story, and it was really just that inner attunement that he was able to be an instrument for those saints. And so it's that inner attunement actually that actually helps us rise. That inner absorption. But all that we're doing, I've heard this sort of analogy before, that all that we're doing in the path of yoga, all the techniques, everything, is just simply raising our sail on our little ship to take us so that the wind of the grace from the masters can actually blow us across to the shores that we're trying to reach. I remember this story from Swami's life, where he was new on the path. He was there at Mount Washington, and he was doing all the right things. He was doing all the the meditation practices and all the right attitude and all these things. But then he overheard it was shared from someone else that had heard Master saying, "Look how much I've changed, Walter." And it made him understand this idea that it was actually him just tuning into Master that was able to help him rise. We have to give it 100%, but ultimately all we're doing is raising that sail so that we can be sort of buoyed across the ocean. There was a time late in Swamiji's life where Jyotish and David were with him in India, and they asked him this simple question as they were getting ready to leave, and they asked him this simple question: what is necessary for success on the spiritual path? Like, what is the key to success on the spiritual path? And Swami just put down whatever he was doing, and immediately said, and I'm forgetting what they actually mean. Longer and deeper meditation, and seeing God as the doer. And then he just picked up what he was doing and went back and the second line, went back to what he was doing. But this is what the reading is all about. It's so simply put. We just in our lives, it's the inner and the outer playing together. It's about that inner awareness, and that's what we have to do, is continue to increase our awareness of that inner reality, whether it's in that longer and deeper guru-given meditation, as it says in the poem Samadhi, or if it's in the outward service, and we can see it as a service to the divine, just like Mary was when she was washing Jesus' feet. But it doesn't matter what we're doing. We can be doing really anything. You can be seeing it as a blessing, that you're being an instrument of blessing for the world. So often on the in spiritual circles, phenomena and things like that, phenomena or spiritual powers even, are taken as signs of spiritual progress. And it's a very interesting thing that Swami there's one time in Master's life where he said, somebody was saying at the end of his life that, oh, he's lost his powers, and Master's response was, here's an avatar, somebody who had performed many miracles. And he said, oh, I never knew that I had any powers. It was just miracles would happen around him. It was because of his deep attunement to the divine that they would just happen through him. But so what Swami actually would say as the signs of spiritual progress, I actually was able to find this in the Raja Yoga book, so I just want to read a few of the things he says. Because it's not about crazy, phenomena, spiritual experiences or spiritual powers, because those things often are a trap. The path to God, Yogananda said, is not a circus. It's not this process of fireworks and Ferris wheels and all this. But some of the things that Swami mentions in Raja Yoga is a growing kindness in your heart, a more self-giving nature, greater calmness under all circumstances, and the ability to accept whatever life brings. And then also combined with this quality of, or the heart being freed of its desires, so that we have desires that sort of encroach on our heart. And bit by bit, as you go, as you meditate, as you see God as the doer, these begin to just sort of fall away, so that you're more and more free in your heart, and you're more free with your energy to do, to channel your energy how you'd like to channel it. And then he said, the most important is that there's an increasing sense of love for God, that sense of devotion. Like in the chant we were chanting, all I live for is to love thee, my beloved friend. And so any way we can make the divine more and more close to our hearts, more and more personal, in the sense that it's your own divine friend. It's an infinite reality, but it's very, very personal. And it's someone, the divine is taking you on this path up the mountain peak. There's actually this beautiful story, speaking of a mountain peak, that Master told. It was a dream that Master had. Many of you have probably heard this, but it was this dream where he was standing in a busy marketplace, and from time to time people would come up to him and sort of look over his shoulder, and there used to be this look of like yearning, and then just sort of this, but it's much too high for me, and that this just kept happening. It's much too high for me. And finally, in the dream, Master turns around and he sees at the top of a mountain this beautiful garden, and he's just this feeling of, oh, it's so beautiful. And then there was this moment of, oh, but it's much too high for me. But then this is the difference between the average person and the avatar. This is what made them an avatar. He said, I can just put one step in front of another, and I can get there. And sure enough, in the dream, one foot in front of the other. And so this is what we have to do. We have to find ways in our lives where we can embrace kindness a little bit more, embrace a more self-giving attitude. We can go deeper in meditation. Find these little ways where I can just take the next step forward. It's very tempting on the spiritual path to either, we see the project that's out before us. We see the mountain peak of where we're trying to get to in self-realization, and it can seem very far away. And so it's very easy to pretend that, I'm just a little bit higher on the mountain than I really am, or pretend that the mountain peak is a little lower than it really is. And say, no, it's not so far. It's not so high. I can get there. But it's very important to just to be able to be self-honest and be sincere and self-accepting. We need to accept ourselves, just like the circumstances that come in our lives. We need to accept ourselves as we are too, and just be able to just go, no, I'm just going to keep taking the next step forward from wherever I am. I think it's my favorite line from the Bhagavad Gita. It's just the sweetness of it is incredible. Is this line where Krishna says, stay wholly absorbed in me, meditate and stay absorbed in me. And if you can't do that, offer me your devotion. And pray to me. And if you can't do that, toil in works pleasing to me. And then the final phrase that's so sweet. And if this thine faint heart fails, give me your failures. And this is what we need to do. We need to not pretend that we're anything greater than we are. There's many times when all we can do is just show up and just kind of go, well, it may be a pile of smoking wreckage today, but here I am. And I'm sincere in that. Like, just that all we can do is offer ourselves from our heart into the divine. And Master said, God doesn't mind your faults, God minds your indifference. And so we just, that quality of just self-offering, no matter what's happening, like I'm here and I'm offering to you. And that's how, at least as far as I understand, that's how we do it.